Life is hard. It comes at you fast, doesn't it? So is being an entrepreneur. You see people with the cars, the boats, the homes, and the travel. What you don't see is how many times they've failed, how hard they work, and how often they bust their butts. This is the Get Real Podcast. Get Real Podcast. We have a lot going on. We talk about life, mental health, business, ups and downs, and we have on some of the most exclusive entrepreneurs in the business world. People that have done it. No BS, no pump you up mentality, just keeping it real and raw. Let's do this. This is Get Real, and this is your host, Mark Lyford.
Hey folks, welcome. Today I'm pleased to introduce to you Tracy Childers. Tracy is from a company called Wishlist Products, and Tracy is the co-founder of Wishlist Products. And if you caught our podcast last week, talking to Neil Stafford about membership sites, this is kind of an extension on from that. And we're going to be talking about recurring income, membership sites, and everything. So welcome, Tracy. How are you?
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate you having me. I'm doing great. I'm ready to roll.
Good. So just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and anything else you want to share.
Yeah, Mark, I guess I had what some people might call a unique childhood. Right around maybe the age of around 9 or 10 or so. My dad had been an entrepreneur, and he started kind of transitioning his business and got more into investing in real estate, and then he started teaching people about how to invest in real estate. So I kind of cut my teeth going through a teenager and working in the information products business. I thought that was kind of normal, and everybody else was like, you do what now? It wasn't your typical like summer job for a teenager. I was back in the day duplicating audio cassette tapes and shipping them out to people in the mail. And from that experience, I recognized that there's a huge opportunity to create a product where you create it one time and then you can sell it over and over and over and over without doing all the work. So I was kind of always focused on that information product type business. So then fast forward a little bit and I go to college, and what do you want to study? I was like, I don't know. I know it's going to be business. And then I got there and decided I would study marketing. And I remember it very specifically talking to my dad, and I said, you know what? I'm about to graduate with a college degree in marketing in 1 month. And the problem is, I don't feel like I know anything at all about marketing. And I remember what he said. It was so important to me and has been throughout my career. He said, you really didn't go to school to learn marketing. He's like, you basically went there and you proved that you can do what you said you were going to do. And so it was kind of a relief, a burden that I was carrying. He's like, you'll learn anything you want to. This is way back in the day, Mark. I mean, there was no YouTube or internet and everything like it is now. I mean, literally, you can learn anything online. And so I did. After that, I just started studying marketing. I was always kind of in to techie stuff. I started doing some database consulting work, and so I got to really learn how things work with small businesses. And I ultimately, as I kind of kept moving along, I found myself around 2003 or so, just being infatuated with the internet and internet marketing. And I was like, well, what am I going to sell? And so I landed on creating software. And so I had a couple of good projects where my very first one I did as a partnership with a good friend of mine named Armin Morin. And what I learned from Armin was that whenever you create software, you don't have to be the one that creates the software. And so I found is like there's a whole bunch of great programmers out there, and most of them don't know what to build. And so I was looking at the market and what people were wanting. And so back then we did our first one was a screen recording software similar to Camtasia. And so I learned about how to work with coders and tell them what they wanted to, what we wanted them to do and build for us. And then eventually that moved on to my current project, which is Wishlist member. We started that back in 2008. And just kind of kept building it from there. We actually built that for ourselves.
That's interesting. You build it for yourself, because a lot of good software, especially, is created for that reason. And then they're like, well, hang on a minute. We're using this ourselves. We like what we've done. So why wouldn't everybody else want it? And, you know, you hear that a lot, especially with good, long-standing software that people like and continue to use. A lot of people, the backstory is that they did it for themselves. I'm going to go sideways for a minute, because you mentioned about how to find programmers, and programmers don't necessarily know how to market. How's your experience been of finding programmers? And I'm asking this from a point of view of someone that has had an absolute nightmare in the past.
Yeah.
And still, if one of the big disappointments in my business life for the last 20 odd years, I had some great programmers around me back in 20 years ago. Right. So very different times, but I haven't been able to. It's like Neil, who I keep talking about, who here in the UK, Neil Stafford. He has had a coder tech guy for years, and his business has really benefited from that. The services that he can offer, the products he can offer by having an in-house. How was your experience finding good, reliable programmers to make these products?
Well, I've got a lot to say about that, Mark. And
I can imagine.
I will tell you that sometimes I'm going to put the emphasis on sometimes you just get lucky. But that is not the typical way that it happens. So if you go all the way back to that first project that I was talking about, back then, everybody that I used was on a site called Rent-A-Coder. That was back when there was like Elance, Rent-A-Coder, and now they've kind of all, consolidated. And I think most of this is on Upwork. But I was always finding people there, and what I found in my experience is many times you can spend the majority of your time trying to get the right person to work for you on the job, and you have to be really really persistent on that. And I had a little trick back then. So let's just say that you want to build this big thing, right? Like I have this vision for this project that I want to build, and many times it's going to take a long time to build what you actually want. There is no way in the world you want to go through and describe everything that you want to do. What you want to do is build what I call a decoy project. And it could be some really small piece of that project, or something that's not even part of that, but it's somewhat related, simply to see how good the coder is going to perform. And so in those decoy projects, this is going way back in my history, Mark. So I would say, hey, I know that over the life of this project, I'm probably going to have to spend like $5,000 or $6,000 to build it. But I'm not going to post a project for $5,000 or $6,000. I'm going to come up with something really small that's about $50, and I'm going to post it, and then I'm going to hire probably 3 or 4 people to do that very same project, and then whoever does it the best is probably the one that I'm going to stick with. And, I mentioned the word persistence before. One project that I had, I made, you know, well, well over six figures over the lifetime of that project. I was so close to giving up because I would get somebody and then they wouldn't do it. And I'd get somebody and then they wouldn't be able to do it. And it's like in my mind, I started to think fictitiously, oh, maybe this can't be done. But then you actually, when you're really doing your research, like, no, of course this can be done. I just haven't found the right person to be able to do it. And so, on that particular project, I went through like at least five people, and I was like, I just don't know if I could find anybody. And then finally, I'm like, I'm not going to give up, and I just kept going. And I've seen that with working with other people. Very, very same thing. It's like, I've just had so many bad experiences. Like, let's break it down. Let's hire somebody small, and then just keep going. And then eventually, once you do have a really good coder, man, it's going to give you so much more confidence. And like you were talking about, uh, you've seen that with your friend, right? He's had a good tech guy on his team. And so it changes the mindset so that you no longer think, oh, we can't do that. You think, yeah, we can do that.
Possible. Yeah, it's a great tip. Don't go and post a $5,000 project. Go and post a $50 and put a budget of 150, 200 bucks and do a test. Really, it's a test.
And I'll tell you one more thing that I think is really important on that. When you should just spend your time looking at listings, because you can see what all projects people are listing, and just start reading how people describe their projects, and you'll quickly be like, oh, that's a terrible description. And then you'll see one, you're like, oh man, that's a really good description. But in every time that I did a description, I would ask a question. And then, because I'm wanting them, before I hire them, to ask me a question. Please let me know if you have any questions about whatever this is. And then when they come back and they'll ask you a question, then you give them the answer, and then you ask them another question, because you want to open up that communication, because the communication is really what's key. I've had nightmare stories just like you have, and they can get crazy, Yeah,
they
you just don't want to waste your time on that.
No, you don't want to waste anybody's time, and it's wasted time, resources, money, what have you. It's funny because I have had so many, well, I think, good ideas in the past for certain projects, but I've never been able to find a coder. But I also didn't go along the lines of, okay, it's a XYZ budget, but I'm going to go and do a test. And it makes complete sense. I don't actually know why I never thought of that in the first place. I'm going through it at the moment with it's a little bit different because it's very niche for any UK listeners, but I'm going with the American pronunciation of niche, which is knit. It's related to the gaming industry. It's super, super niche, and it's a whole chicken and egg situation. So it's not in any way sense normal. But I went to different gaming expos. I've spoken to different software companies, and I'm just not sure the best way of going. I've got two quotes. One isn't already in the gaming side, but is in the niche, and they're programmer. And then I got one in the that's specifically gaming software. And then I'm thinking, these are decent quotes, $50,000-$60,000 for the project. And then I'm thinking, should I go and what I really want to do is find somebody in-house, give them some equity, and work like that? Because with both either one of the quotes I've got, they provide you it to your specification, you own it, and then you've got to support it. And I would want that to be in-house. So it is a minefield. But in the past, certainly in the last 10 years, some of the ideas I've had, I love the idea of software. What you've done with Wishlist is Wishlist member is amazing, and it's how it's developed, which we'll go on to and talk about in a few minutes. You can see the evolution of it. But it's an interesting point on whether it be hiring people for coding or software or any work, really. That what you just said is you need somebody to write stuff for you and go and do the big project, use it as a filter system. Good thing, which I will be implementing. So thanks for the tip.
Sure.
So let's move on to talk about Wishlist and the journey. So everybody knows I was trying to figure it out. I think I started using Wishlist member. So for anybody that doesn't know, I'm going to first of all, before I babble on about when I started using it, I'm going to let Tracy tell you what it is so people know what we're talking about.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So Wishlist Member is a plugin for WordPress that instantly transforms your site into a membership site. And a lot of times people hear that and they think, oh, membership site, that means monthly recurring income. And I was like, no, actually, monthly recurring income is a business model. A membership site is basically just something that protects your content and does all sorts of other things. The mere fact that you're now able to require people to log in with a username and a password in order to control what they have access to opens up all kinds of things. Now you can say, well, we have one level, they have access to this. Another level has access to this. If you do this, you can get added to that level. And sometimes, you're doing a free trial. Sometimes it's people are paying one time and they're accessing a course. So that's the sense that WordPress works on two primary things. One are plugins and one are themes. Themes are how your site typically looks, and plugins are how your site typically acts. And so Wishlist Member is a plugin. We created it around October of 2008. And at the time, there was a lot of exposure about people wanting to run membership sites and the idea of creating a recurring revenue stream. And there just weren't a lot of options. At that time, there was one that was really high priced, and it was like a proprietary system. It's like, you use that. And then there was another one that was really low, but it was really primarily used for sites that were running in HTML, where you had to hand code everything. And there was this big movement of, wow, this thing, WordPress, is getting pretty popular. And so when you start to look out there weren't a lot of options. And we're like, this is what we need. And we had an idea of what we wanted to build. And so we started building it for ourselves so that we could run a membership site of our own. And we knew that there was a little bit of demand in that industry, but we really didn't understand how big it potentially would be and how many more competitors would come along. Because controlling access to your site, it really is, it's a big thing when building an online business.
How many people or sites use Wishlist at the moment?
Mark, the number changes every day. But it's roughly been installed on over 110,000 websites.
Wow.
And that they might not all be active. We don't, but whenever they activate on one, we have track of that. And on our site, it updates every day.
Cool. So yeah, if you've listened to this podcast before, or if you haven't and you want to listen to some of the past ones I've talked about, I'm a big fan of recurring membership income. But like Tracy just said, Wishlist is not just, and I don't want this to be all about Wishlist, but Tracy's here. I want to talk about the journey with Wishlist. And the reason I'm such a fan of Wishlist is because I use it myself, and I've been using it for now probably over 12 years now. I've seen the product evolve, develop, I was in relatively at the beginning, and it's the only thing I've ever used. I have looked at others, but I've stuck with this. And I'm a big fan of WordPress. Pretty much everything I do is WordPress. Real Entrepreneurs run on WordPress. Everything pretty much is WordPress. WordPress, Wishlist, Elementor, which is my favorite for the editor and all that stuff, you will see on my site. But as Tracy was saying earlier on, it's not necessarily just about recurring income. Now, we're going to go down the recurring income path today, but even if you've just got content to share that you don't want everybody being able to share, you can use this software, Wishlist. Even if you want to just charge for a course and there's no recurring element to it, but you want to give access to your course and drip feed that course content every day, every week, or every month, you can use Wishlist for it. So it could just be a fixed price. It could be, $100, 200, 300, 400 for access to the course. They have access as long as you want them to. So it doesn't just have to be about recurring. So when we talk about membership, it can be, like you said, content protection, fixed term memberships, courses, all kinds of stuff that you can do. How have you seen? Another question just popped into my head. How have you seen the change from a typical membership customer to e-learning? Because e-learning is the hot thing at the moment. I know Wishlist has always been able to drip feed content from what I can remember, but having that e-learning platform is a big thing now. It's a massively growing market. How have you seen customers wanting that, and how does Wishlist member deal with that?
It's a great question, Mark, and you're right. It has changed significantly, over the last 4 or 5 years or so. And initially, it seemed like people were buying Wishlist member to run like one type of a site, saying, hey, I'm going to have a course, and this course is on this site. And then they might start another course, and that course was on that site. So they might be running 2 separate sites. And now what we're seeing is, okay, no, people are wanting to create a customer center so that, hey, I buy from Mark, and all the courses that I bought from Mark are in Mark's customer center. So I log in here and I have access to this course and I have access to that one. Other people were saying, hey, I'm running a monthly membership site where I'm adding new content every month, throughout the month, and people are paying me. And then once they stop paying me access, they no longer get the content. Now what we're seeing is that more people are having what I would call a hybrid site, meaning, hey, I got a course that's kind of the front end of my funnel. And then once they buy the course, they go through the course, then we move them into a monthly recurring revenue membership. And so a lot of times people are coming to get your course so that they can understand what more about the topic. And then they're wanting to be in the membership because they want to be a part of the community so that they're engaging in other people that have the same interests. We were talking about Wishlist member, and you introduced me as the co-founder. So back when we first started, one of my close friends, Stu McLaren, was my business partner, and I give him credit. He came up with a saying is like, people come for the content, but they stay for the community. And so that's what we're seeing. More and more people, it's like front end, buy my course, back end sale, let me get you into the membership. And now you're kind of having the best of both worlds. And the way we do that is, way back in the day, we were like, hey, just build a course and have some pages. Here's kind of a format. And we did that for a long time. And then your question is about the new learning management system, LMS, started to come along. And what I found is they do all kinds of things, but the primary thing that we saw, myself included, whenever I would purchase a course, is I really need to save my progress. I need to know which videos I've watched and which ones I haven't. And so there are plenty of other LMS plugins that do that out in the market, and we have integrations with all of those. And then we also built our own learning management system to run courses, and it has badges and points and all kinds of stuff like that.
What's that called?
It's called Course Cure, and we started it as it requires. When we started it, it required Wishlist member in order to run it, and then we kind of realized this product could probably stand on its own. So they still work seamlessly together, but if somebody is just going to do a course, they could grab that product as well.
Cool. That's something I need to look into, because that's something I don't have from you. So
yeah, we should talk.
I've got. So for everybody who knows, I've talked about it before. At some point in 2023, the Real Entrepreneur membership is coming. It's not a sales pitch. It is coming. I've been talking about it a long time. I'm talking about it off and on. It was initially called Entrepreneur Action. It's all under Real Entrepreneur now. It's coming. It will have an academy area. It will be a community-based thing, and it will use Wishlist, and maybe it will use Course Cure as well, because I don't have such a thing. On last week's, again, keep talking about Neil, because it's the content's so similar. The discussion's so similar. The two words that came up last week was connection to the owner of the membership site and community. And that's what people want. They need. It's not just, here's the course, off you go. It's basically asking questions about whatever it is they're learning, or the information they've got access to, the access they've got. But it's more than that. It's meeting other like-minded people. It's being able to network with them away from the normal social media channels, which for me increasingly get too crowded. Yes, you can run a Facebook group. We talked about this last week. I run one of my hobbies, a group. I've got nearly 13,000 people in a group, but I still worry that it's on Facebook. And I know another group in the same interest group that I run one in, they had a 50,000+ group, and for whatever reason it got closed down and they couldn't get it back. I don't like that, and it makes me worried. And running your own, you haven't got that threat. Talking about community and the connection side of things, do you know of many customers that, in addition to using Wishlist for protecting their content, have made more of that kind of, I don't want to say social network, but social community within it? Because that's something else that I've had a few questions about. As I've mentioned in the past, I've been looking at WordPress based. You've got BuddyPress, Peepso, whatever. Does Wishlist work well with them, any of them? And two, have you got customers that you know about that have created their own more social network within their membership?
Yeah. So BuddyPress has been around for a very long time, and it was one of those projects that just kind of continued to grow, but there wasn't any like real big company behind it. I think it was kind of a side project for some people, and so the development on it became pretty slow. And so then somebody started another one, which was what's called a fork of it, and it's called Buddy Boss. So Buddy Boss is a company, and they sell both a they give away the framework of the plugin, but then they sell a theme that makes it look really, really well. And so we work directly with Buddy Boss. So that means that everything we do with Buddy Boss should also be compatible with BuddyPress. Peepso I've heard a little bit about, but I haven't had a lot of real good experience with it myself. Probably the best example that I have seen is, I mentioned my friend Armand Morin earlier, and Armand was just an incredibly smart and talented marketer, and he runs a site called Marketing University, and has been running it since around 2005. It has kind of changed names because it was originally called AM2, Armin Morin, and the number 2, and then it just transitioned. But he's all into creating the interactions and the forum groups, and people can communicate directly with one another, and it's been really, really successful. So I'd say that's a real good example. And it's this kind of the same thing that you mentioned, Mark, is it is a little scary when you build something that's can be quite large and then you don't have control over it. You mentioned the number, and I heard a story just literally last week of somebody that had roughly like 60,000 followers on a platform and then just got shut down. And who do you call?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't even have to be anything you've done. It's somebody. It could be something a member that's done, even unintentionally. Like I'm. For those of you who don't know and you haven't heard me talk about it, one of my big passions and hobbies is the sport of racing pigeons, and I run a racing pigeon Facebook group. And one of the biggest groups on Facebook previously was just somebody. Facebook have a rule: you can't post any livestock for sale. And somebody accidentally didn't know the rules, whatever, posted it, and that was it, and it was gone. So it's easy to do. It doesn't necessarily have to be if you've done nothing wrong, it can't happen. That's not the case. And running your own stuff, I'm a control freak, and I like being in control. So one of the ideas that I've got is to try my best to. You're never going to get everybody. I don't know how many members you would get. This is free members as well. This is not even charged. I don't know how many you get, but I like the idea of eventually, it's not a business, so it's not right up there on my priority, to be honest, but eventually port people over to their own, another version, but one we own and control. I like. But yeah, you mentioned Body Boss. I do recall when I was looking into this before me getting their theme, which, like you said, worked out of the box, but really well if it works with Wishlist to protect content, because then what you've got is you've got the perfect community. We talked last week about free versus paid. It's potentially a good way of having a free community with which promotes the premium, and then that's where you get into your content being protected for premium members only. So there's many ways you can do it, but basically, for anybody that's listened last week and has got it in their mind sparked about, okay, I like the idea specifically of recurring income. Like I said, look at it at minimum as a content protection mechanism, a course selling without recurring fees mechanism to protect courses and content, and then recurring income. If you've been sparked from listening to the previous ones about it, Wishlist is able to, it's a low cost. What's the cost per?
I believe right now we've just been changing some things. I think it's $2.99 per year right now.
So for $299 a year, so $25 a month, 70 something cents a day, you've got this working for you in the background, doing everything. It works seamlessly with other things. So again, I'm going to, forgive me for a minute if you're listening to this, you know about this stuff. This is a podcast for everybody of all levels. So what you can do with Wishlist, for instance, is this, that as somebody signs up as a member, it will go and ping their email address into one of the autoresponders like GetResponse, Aweber, any of those. So it will be building your member list for you on the side. It integrates to a whole bunch of other things, which I can't even remember since seeing the last update last week. But it will automate everything that you want to do, and it runs on WordPress, which I still think is the easiest thing for anybody. If you've not got a budget to go and pay somebody to set this stuff up for you, trust me, with the information, the videos that these guys put out, you can have a membership set up within half an hour at basic. Obviously, you only got to get all your content in, but actually the structure to do it, half an hour's job, I think. Hour if you're a bit slower. Done. Integrates with payment processors, all of that stuff. So it's pretty much membership, however you want to play the membership thing as a business model goal. As a solution, it's pretty good. Like I said, it's what I'm using and going to be using on everything that I do. So Wishlist member pitch over, but it is very good. And it's also, again, way before I arranged this podcast, it's in my Real Entrepreneur Tools book, which you can get for free as well. It's been in there from the first version I ever published. So I only talk about stuff that I really believe in. And I believe in this. Let's go on a little bit now, Tracy, to talk about the journey of it, because it's all very good as talking about hiring programmers. And what's the journey been like from you for 14 now years you've been doing it? You know, you were in the beginning setup, hustle stage, bootstrapping everything, I would imagine, to now where you've got 110,000 sites using it. Well, how's the journey been for you? What's the ups and downs been like?
I'm not sure how much time we have, Mark. I'm joking.
We have about 25 minutes left. So.
I'm joking about that. It just, a lot of times people can look at a company and saying, "Oh, wow, they're doing great," and it's easy to compare yourself to what you think it looks like on the outside, and not realize how difficult it may have been to get there. I mean, we've been through so many things. I was just talking with somebody the other day. We were looking into some of our domain names, and I was like, man, I have a story about that one. Like somebody hacked into one of our email accounts, and then when they had control of the email accounts, they hacked into GoDaddy, reset the password, then transferred our domain name, and all of a sudden, your sales come to a screeching halt, and you're like, what happened? And then you look and you don't even have your website up, as somebody's holding it hostage. So the thing is, Mark, any business that's going to be a long-term sustainable business.
Hang on a minute. You can't move on to that. Right. No. What was that? What happened with that?
Oh, okay. I left you hanging on the story. Yeah, we contacted GoDaddy because the person was basically holding our domain hostage and wanted us to pay them money. And we're like, I'm not sure that this is the right way to go. And we contacted GoDaddy, and they facilitated it, and we ended up getting it back. But you talk about a scary thing, like somebody saying, "Hey, I want $5,000 to get your business back." You're like, wait a minute, I'm not about to just send $5,000 to who's basically a criminal, But I think a big point in that story, Mark, is I read a lot, and one of the books that I read over the last couple of years that was recommended to me is called "The Obstacle is the Way." And short synopsis of it is you really can't control all the things that are going to happen to you. The only thing that you can control is how you react to it, So in business, especially technology business, you're going to deal with a lot of ups and downs, and we've had plenty. when we first started, things were great and it's not so difficult. You have a vision of what you want to build, and then you start building it, and there's nothing really in the way. You're focused on building. Now you start to sell it, and if you're fortunate, people will start to buy it, and then now you start to get customers, now you start to have support, now you start to learn things. So now the development starts to slow down because you're also dealing with support. And now how do you get to, okay, well, we're getting money, and you mentioned the word bootstrapped, and they're like, yeah, we're bootstrapped, but Stu and I both had other responsibilities that we were making income from at the time. And so how do you get the business to get to the point where now, okay, I can let go of this and I don't have to worry about that income? And they're like, okay, well, now we need more people, we need more support. So as you start to go, and then you also start to get more competitors, and then the market changes, something will happen with WordPress. All that to say is we've been through so many crazy things along the way, and maybe about 6 years into the journey, Stu decided that he was gonna leave and go out on his own, and that was good. He's done really well, and he focuses on teaching people about membership sites. And
I get his emails.
yeah, he's a very talented teacher, and he's just a really great, likable guy, and so he's done really well. And so when he left, it was a big transition for me, because he and I were doing marketing strategy together, and then he typically implemented the marketing tactics, right? And he would make a video or write a copy, after we kind of discussed some stuff. And then when he left, I was like, oh, I'll just do that. I'll do that now. But yet I'm still in charge of all the finance and all the stuff. And so I got to the point where I'm just wearing too many hats. And so I started to build teams, and then we would make decisions as a team, but sometimes that can take longer, and it was still bogging me down because I was on all of those teams. And so you start to get into a feeling like of burnout. And you said because you've been with the product for so long, you've seen it grow. And we got to a point in time when I started to recognize this thing was built for early WordPress, and then WordPress continued to change. And now it's like we couldn't do things back when it first started that we could now. So I really wanted to have a new user experience, a new interface. So we basically rebuilt the product pretty much from the ground up. It wasn't completely started over because we had so many people using the product. It also had to be compatible with all those people. So it would almost have been easier if we kept this over here and then started from the ground up. But so we kind of untangled all this mess that's a harsh word. It was still a good product, but in my opinion, the user experience and the interface had gotten really clunky.
Well, I'll attest to it, right? So you and I had a conversation via a message, can't remember how it was, a couple of weeks ago. And I had let my support expire, not intentionally, credit card expired, email address I was using, I sold the domain name actually, whatever. And so I had the old version, and I've started, I've got a new membership that I'm in development now, crypto related membership. And so I got my support and updates back up and running, and then I installed the new version on this site. Wow, what a difference. Not saying the old version was bad, it was great at the time, but what a difference. The whole UI, the whole wizard setup, it makes it super easy. So I can tell there's a hell of a lot of work gone into that.
And, because your podcast is called Get Real, I'll get real with you. I made the decision we need to rebuild this thing, and I thought surely this won't take the whole year, and you start to get around Thanksgiving and Christmas time, I mean, like, it's just not going to happen. And so now you're moving into the next year, and I'm like, my goodness, I'm going to be on this vacation with my son in June. We're going over to Europe, and it's like, I got to have all of this done before I go. Didn't happen. Now you get into another Christmas, Thanksgiving era, it's still not done. And so finally, I mean, it was over 2 years in the development of this thing, and I was the primary user experience guy saying, no, if you click this, it has to do that, and if that does this, it has to do that. So we did it all as a team. But when you're doing that nonstop, and you're running a business, it's like, I mean, it can be pretty taxing on you. And we got to the point where we were ready to release, and man, I felt like I had nothing left in my tank. And that's the time when you need to be getting into marketing mode. Like you need to be proud of everything that you accomplished. And I was just like exhausted. And then other things hit you that you weren't expecting. Just like, okay, there's another gut punch, and there were times when I was like, man, I just don't know how I'm going to be able to pull all this off. But fortunately, I started doing some things that helped me get more healthy, and I just felt like I got my second wind back, and it turned out well. But I mean, that's the reality of being in business. It's not always going to be peachy.
It's always to me, it's the reality which I've learned to my great expense over the last 15, 20 years, that if you say something's going to take 6 months, no, it's going to take 12 at least. Exactly what you just said. It's like this now with my new racing pigeon online betting platform. No, it's first in the world, very niche. 6 months to build it. Okay, so it's going to take 12. Maybe I would get like a beta out before 12, and know as well, it's going to cost you double what you think. Same thing. The time equals money in this game. So double the time, double the money is what I always now tell myself of anything, not just software, but anything pretty much. Because all stuff always comes up that you don't know where no one expecting.
Takes longer and costs more. It's just the rules.
With regards to marketing, when you had that transition from Stu leaving the business and you had to, well, there's a few things here. Marketing, I want to talk about briefly. I want to talk about, you mentioned teams and wearing too many hats. They're the three things that have just come out of what you've been saying. With regards to marketing, you took that over. Now you've obviously got people in your team that help do things. But for your business, what have you found the most effective marketing?
Well, we've tried a lot of different things, and we've gone through some transition recently where I sold the product. I'm still involved, but I sold the intellectual property, and I'm still involved in the company. And the new owner of Wishlist Members, a friend of mine named Micah Mitchell. And so he's come in with a great deal of leadership experience, and some of the things he's learned about establishing teams and routines. And one of the things that I think is the most critical piece that I really fell flat on my face when I was trying to do everything on my own is to have ongoing marketing. You need to be creating content all the time, whether it's just sending out a simple email saying, hey, look at what's happening, starting a podcast. And, the problem is if everybody says, that sounds great if you have a team, but I'm not there. So the only thing you can do is you can do what you can do, right? And you just say, hey, I'm gonna get this done, but I'm gonna start doing this, and I'm gonna be pretty consistent about it. And then once you figure it out, now you can hire somebody and say, hey, this is what we do, and I need for you to do this thing every week. And so we have somebody on our team that's making social media posts, And then we have somebody that's writing an email. And it doesn't have to always be the one person doing everything, but you just kind of have to establish routines. And I'd say the biggest thing is being consistent in terms of marketing, because you just when I was down, and I'm not a real big on social media, and we had our Facebook page, and at one point in time, way back when we were trying to build it, and we got a lot of people to like the page, and then we just kind of forgot about it. And then somebody came back, and they made this comment on our Facebook page, and it's like, are these guys still in business?
Wow.
And in your mind, when you're like, of course we're still in business. It's like we're working on this every day. Like, we have team meetings and all of the things that kept us busy. But if nobody else knows that, they would have that harsh question for you. Are you guys still around? And so that's where it's kind of a balancing act. You have to be active in development to stay up with the trends and stuff, but you also have to be out there and be other places, show up on other people's podcasts. And it's because if they don't know, then it's just not helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult when anybody's starting wearing the too many hats thing as well. I mean, people say about teams. So let's talk about teams for a minute. How did you find transitioning from you? So teams are related to cash flow, the business you've got going on, the time you've got. I've said publicly I really miss having an assistant, which is on my list for next year, because I know I do way too many things that I'm better spending my time doing elsewhere. How did you find it being you wearing all these hats to putting a team in place? Because I know from my experience, I'm not a great manager of people. I know I'm not. I'm either too soft or too hard. I'm not a great manager. And of any of the teams that I've had, the most team I ever had was 26 people. I had another team 2015, 2016, around 10 people. But I've always sought to have a manager managing that team. One, as a filter. So I kind of, for me, what's worked in the past, because of my personality type, what have you, I've had my assistant and I've had my manager. That doesn't mean that any of the team can't come and speak to me, pass ideas through me, whatever, but actually managing what gets done. I found assistant and manager as my kind of thing. One, how did you build your team? What did you do to find them? How did you find the transition from I'm wearing all these hats on my own to, okay, I've got a team and now it's running as I want it to?
Yeah, Mark, I mentioned earlier, sometimes you do get lucky, and I do feel like I have been fortunate in some areas. I was working with somebody, and they had an ongoing business, and they established a big team. And I've been an entrepreneur for majority of my life, but there were some interesting reasons when I decided I wanted to work with somebody. I was actually an employee for a little while because they wanted to start some software, and I had experience building software, hiring people. And so it didn't work out, and we decided to shut it down and part ways. And out of that, I was able to, if he was going to shut the department down, then he's not going to need any of the coders. And I said, well, do you mind if I take them with me? And so I really did get very fortunate. And our lead developer, Mike Lopez, and he was overseas in the Philippines, worked for me for almost 2 years when I was working for somebody else. And then he's the one that wrote all the code for Wishlist Member. So in the beginning, it's like when you talk about being bootstrapped, he was our one expense. So Stu and I, we were working for free, but we were paying his salary, and it wasn't, really expensive, but it's a cost. So both of us are having to put in money, and then as you're in the building phase, you're losing money, and then finally start to sell it, and you're like, okay, we have money. What's the first thing that you're going to do with your money? Are you going to immediately pay yourself back, or you want to look saying, okay, well, actually, we need to add another person to our team? And so we just knew, hey, in order for this to be to the level that we want and we want to grow, we need to continue to invest in our team. And we did that. And we were very fortunate because we timed the market pretty well. And fortunately, it didn't take long for Wishlist Member to grow and to be fairly popular. And we just knew. So, but even when you start to get the money, then you sometimes can start to make poor decisions. Like, did we really need that many people? We were needing to hire somebody, and then we were like got kind of excited, and then we hired 5 people all at once. And looking back, it actually worked out well, because some of them, like, it just wasn't a good match. And if you only hired one and they're not a good match, now you're starting over. But in this case, I think we hired either 5 or 6, and 2 of them fell off like immediately. So we ended up with 3 people out of that. But yeah, it's a tricky thing.
I've overhired before. Yeah, it's a fine line to get it right. Too many staff for what you need, not enough. It's a hard thing. It's a hard thing from their point of view. Am I overworking these people to be the most streamlined and effective? Have I got people sitting around doing nothing? It's hard, and it's down to the quality of people and their work ethic as well. Again, we come back to community. Any of the teams I've tried to put together in the past that I've done successfully or not so successfully, it's always been trying to be we're in it together. That's where the leadership comes in, through tough times, through good times. You now have a new thing which you've not had because of the dynamic of your business, but a lot more remote teams are there than used to be before. There's that in mind. I'm a big fan of remote working, but any of the teams I've previously had have all been 75% of them have been office based. There's all these things to work out, and managing them, like you said, it's great to have people doing the work in their own field, but that's a whole other ball game of managing them people. Make sure they're happy, make sure they know what they got to do. If you're not careful, that's a full-time job in itself. They say do what you're best at doing. That's just, we all should identify what we're best at. I've identified I'm best at leading and ideas. I'm not a details person. Not a details person at all. And that's why I found and future teams that I build will be based around having somebody as a manager to manage that team for all the reasons I've said. I assume your team now is it all remote? Is it some in-house?
It is all remote, and we've always been that way. It was kind of funny in the beginning when we first started. I mentioned Stu earlier. He is from Canada, and we were a U.S. based team, but I was the only one in the U.S., which was kind of funny. A U.S. based company, but I was the only one. So we had him in Canada, and then our first couple hires were in Canada, and then obviously Mike, who was overseas in the Philippines. But yeah, it's always been remote, and I've gone through some times when I felt like there were challenges, and then in my mind it's like, man, if we really want to take this thing to the next level, we need to all be in an office. And then sometimes that's just a mind. There are certain businesses that will only work in an office, right? Like a doctor's office for the most part. bricks and mortar business that you all have to work together. But what happened with the pandemic, almost everybody was going to challenge, hey, can you work from home? And a lot of people found, oh yeah, I actually can. So we're in a different situation because it's virtual technology. It's always been remote. And so over the lifetime of the business, we've done things just to kind of be structured, saying, hey, we have this specific meeting this time every week, and we do these things once a month and things like that, just so that we can kind of all stay in touch. And now, I mentioned we've kind of been restructuring. We call it a daily huddle, and it's a 30-minute meeting for the entire team. So everybody is kind of, rather than, these teams are still meeting on their meetings, but we had a lot of that before, where these people met and they never really talked to these people. So now we're still doing that, but there's the one daily huddle every day, everybody, and it's a fast-paced meeting, but you get to know the rest of your team, and it's really, really helpful.
A quick sideways question on that. What do you use to manage your teams software-wise? What infrastructure do you have to get everybody communicating together? I'd be interested to know that. One of the reasons why I use various task management team systems before, and I wrote about a few of them in one of my books. What do you use? What do you guys use?
Yeah, I'd say that it's probably not necessarily my strong suit. For many years, we used Basecamp, and I like Basecamp, and just some projects were being managed in Basecamp, but then others, the software development is being managed in GitHub because of the repositories and all that, and the releases and everything. But then we use Slack so that we can do the one-on-one communication, and we have a channel here, and then email. We're kind of in between. There's not necessarily one big project management system. Some departments run there. So it's just kind of a combination.
Hybrid, really, yeah. All right, cool. Okay, well, we're about at the hour. It's been fascinating for me. You're one of the, in this early stage of the podcast, you're one of the few people that I've done the podcast with who I don't really know. I know you from the product I use, but I don't really know. And I've really enjoyed it, and I'm hoping people get the value out of this. What I like about it is you've been real, and you've talked about the ups and the downs with everything. To me, what you've been through demonstrates that things can be done. If you're listening or watching this and you've got an idea for a business, for a piece of software, for an idea that you can set up a new business, or if you're already listening to this, you have a business and you want to create a protected content for that business or a membership, as we've discussed, it shows you what can be done. And I will say, as I've said before, I'm a big fan of Wishlist Member. It's my go-to thing for using anything that needs to be protected. It will be running everything, as I've said. And I just think you guys have put a lot of effort into a simple product to use. It doesn't, with a lot of these products, it's almost like you need a degree to learn them. This is not the case. The wizard sets you up once it's installed, which is easy to do. It works. And I'm telling you, as a pitch for Wishlist, I don't get paid for this in any way. I'm doing it because Tracy's on there now. If you are going down this road, you should look at Wishlist and you should use it. Thank you, man, for this. It's been insightful and useful, and definitely the takeaway for me personally is, if you have got an idea for a project, put some really small projects out to test people. That's my personal takeaway from it, because I've never done that. If people want to find out more about you, find out more about Wishlist Member, where's the best place for people to go?
Probably the best place is wishlistmember.com, and we've got all kinds of stuff there. I said earlier, I'm not big on social media, but you can find me on Facebook and LinkedIn as well.
Wishlistmember.com is the place.
Wishlistmember.com is the best place, and if you needed to get in touch with me, you could always ask our support team and stuff like that as well.
Cool. Thank you again. Maybe we'll do another one at some point. I said this exactly the same thing last week, because I haven't been through hardly any of my questions that I would normally ask because
I
it
know that.
just flowed but this is what it's about. This is what Get Real's about, and it goes where it goes. We could have probably done another hour.
Yeah, I agree, Mark, and I appreciate you having me, and I also appreciate the work that you're doing because, I mean, you know, the name Get Real is important. You know, we're
Yeah,
in this business as entrepreneurs together, and it can get really lonely at times.
loneliness is
I'm
a big
sure
thing.
you know a lot more about that, you know,
Yeah, loneliness is a
and
big thing.
yeah, it is. It can be tough.
As I've talked about before, I'm one of the few people. I think we spoke about this before we actually started recording. I'm one of the few people that talk about the bad times. If I've said it before and I'll say again, if you're of our generation and you look at, well, my generation, you look at Facebook, or if you're younger, you look at Instagram or TikTok or whatever you follow, if you're not careful, you can easily start comparing yourself. You shouldn't, but you do naturally. I've said before, if you're not careful, you can think everybody else is running this great life. If you've got a Facebook feed like mine with nearly 5,000 people, half of them are racing pigeon people, half of them are entrepreneurs. And when you start looking at the entrepreneurs, think, hang on a minute, this guy's doing this or this lady's doing that. They're having a great life.
Yeah.
What about me? Well, it's not always the case. Most people post only the good parts. And they don't post the struggles. They don't post the lonely times. They don't post the times when their head is like a sack of poo. They don't post about this stuff. And I was discussing months ago, prior to Get Real launching as a podcast, I was discussing it with my partner Gabby, and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to go with Get Real. And she's like, I'm not sure whether it's a bit too in your face, like people could take it as a different meaning, like you got to get real, or people find it offensive. And I'm like, you know what, no, sorry, I'm going with it because it is time. There's a lot of BS out there. There's a lot of, like I've said before, and if people listen to this regularly, apologize for me repeating myself. 25 years ago, 30 years ago, when I was starting out in the UK specifically, if you said you wanted to be an entrepreneur, people laughed at you. Not so much in the US because there's a different mindset. The US generally applauds success more. People are used to speaking about success and money more than perhaps in the UK. Now, whether you're in the UK, the US, wherever you are, seemingly everybody and his dog wants to be an entrepreneur. They don't want to be a soccer player or a football player or whatever. They want to be, not everybody, obviously, but there's a lot more people wanting to be entrepreneurs. And I worry that that's because they see all of this Instagram, private planes, Ferraris, which a lot of them, not all again, but a lot of them are rented. It's all fake. It's all false. I'm in the crypto industry. You can't see any more fake scams out there than any other industry than the crypto industry, and all of these people floating around in private jets, and it's not reality. And that's the thing I want to Get Real to be about. I think a lot of people will get more benefit from hearing about the downs as well as the ups. It's easy to come on talking about I've done this, I've done that, your successes. Tell me about how I get through times that I'm inevitably. You could be anybody. You could be us guys. You could be Richard Branson, to any level, and all the way in between. Everybody has their ups and downs. How do you get through that? How do you build a resilience as an entrepreneur? I didn't actually put the word entrepreneur. I mean, the brand is Real Entrepreneur, but I didn't put the word entrepreneur in the podcast because being an entrepreneur is about a life. It becomes a life for people. And I didn't want to just talk about business. I wanted to have the ability to talk about anything. And thank you for saying that. But yeah, Get Real it's time. And I hope over time it can help a lot of people. And stories like yours and what we've just had, that will help people. They may not be interested in running a software business. They may not even be interested in running a membership business, but it's about sharing so people can learn and build their own futures with the tools they need. Resilience is needed in this world we live in the moment, no matter who you are. A level of resilience is needed. And that's what it's about. So, thank you, man. Really great.
Thank you, Mark.
And we may have another one at some point as well. Thanks very much, Tracy.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Get Real podcast with Mark Lyford. Being an entrepreneur isn't all glitz and glamour. Entrepreneurs are some of the most hard-working people in the world. And within entrepreneurship, there's life, mental health, business, ups and downs. And that's why we exist. Our passion is to talk about all of it with no BS. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. Find Mark on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube at Mark Lyford. And be sure to hit the website, realeNtrepreneur.com.